Here I would like to address both of you on this question. You said you didn't come here to debate or defend intelligent design theory. Really? Please tell me you didn't fly here 3,000 miles. You have a brand new book out that's 700 pages long on the evidence for intelligent design that they're selling in the lobby. And everybody here paid $20 to hear you explain how you think it came about. And you don't want to tell us? We'd really like to know. Inquiring minds would like to know. For example, we would like to know how many acts of creation you actually think there were. Just one? Maybe 10 every, say, billion years? Maybe 100 acts of creation? Are there a billion acts of creation where every single species is created, but the subspecies are evolved? Are we to believe that you think every single rat living underground, Dr. Sternberg, is individually created by the designer? Or is there some natural process that gives rise to that variation? Now you, Dr. Sternberg, talked about the changes in the whale sequence there. Now, this is what I call a fossil fallacy. That is, one or two or three or a few fossils do not a science make. That is to say, it's the whole package we put together, because evolutionary science is an inferential science. We infer from the data the activity that's going on. So, for example, here's what Dr. Sternberg did tonight. I'll show you here with a little visual demonstration. He says, here's a fossil whale, maybe a land mammal or almost a fossil whale, and here's one, and there's a big gap there. And Dr. Sternberg says, where is the fossils for that transitional? So we gave him some Ambulocetus natans. There's a beautiful one right there. Dr. Sternberg's answer, now there's 2 gaps in the fossil record. Now you guys got to come up with even more data. So the more data we provide, the more gaps it creates, and that's the fallacy with that argument. That is, he's arguing based on negative evidence, and the more positive evidence we provide, the more gaps there are for his God to fill. That's not science. And that's the problem with that. So, yes. That's fine. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Let's take the last point first. We may both want to jump in here on this. We're not talking about gaps. We're talking about the efficacy, the creative power of the mutation selection mechanism, which is to say the adequacy or lack of adequacy of evolutionary theory. What Dr. Sternberg was pointing out is that all the interesting characters that account for the distinction between a land-walking mammal and a truly aquatic whale occur in a 1 to 3 million year gap. Then he applied the equations of population genetics to what we know about population sizes, mutation rates, generation times, to assess whether the neo-Darwinian mechanism is adequate on its own terms to generate the amount of anatomical novelty that arises. That's nothing about, you're responding to us as if, right out of your debating manual, as if you're dealing with some young earth creationist who just fell off the turnip truck. This is a serious challenge to your view, and it is not about gaps, it's about the adequacy of the mechanism, and you have not addressed that. That is what we came to address because it was the topic agreed by both sides for tonight's debate. I am happy to come back and give a long lecture on my book and the evidence for intelligent design. And as long as we're on the topic, I will say, Michael, every time we have debated, you make the same charge against intelligent design. You claim that it's an argument from ignorance. I put up the same slide every time showing you that it's not, that it's inference to the best explanation. Several times when we've debated, you concede my point, but then you make the next point the next time we debate. I, in fact, wrote about this in the book. Michael says that when we argue for intelligent design, and this is not the topic of the debate tonight, but as long as he's raised it, I will respond. He says that we say, that certain features of living systems, for example, the specified digital information encoded in DNA, could not have arisen or has not been shown to have arisen by any known natural cause. I actually document that in my book. We're talking about the information necessary to produce the first life. Then he says, we say, and I can't think of how it could have done, therefore it was designed. He claims it's an argument from ignorance. That's not the structure of the argument. I argue that there are no known naturalistic processes that have been demonstrated to produce the digital code necessary to produce the first life, not processes based on chance, not processes based on law, not processes based on the combination of the two. But then I note that we know of a type of cause that is known to be sufficient to produce digital information, specified digital information. And that cause is intelligence. And that is something that we know from our uniform and repeated experience, which, following Darwin's own method of reasoning, is the basis of all scientific reasoning about the past. So therefore, using his method of reasoning, we can infer that intelligence is the best explanation based on what we know about the cause and effect structure of the world. Not a supernatural explanation, not a supernatural cause necessarily, but certainly an intelligent cause based on our knowledge of cause and effect.
But what could that possibly mean other than a supernatural cause?
Oh, there's two possibilities.
What does intelligence mean?
Intelligence we know from our own conscious and rational deliberation. You have an intelligence. This is what cracks me up, Michael. You guys think that invoking intelligence is some kind of mysterious thing that means you've jumped off the edge of the rational universe. What are you using but a conscious, deliberative intelligence to formulate the sentences you make in making that argument? Right. We know from direct introspection what it means to be intelligent, and therefore we also know what intelligence can do. And that forms the basis of our experience of cause and effect, which we can use to infer the presence, the antecedent action of an intelligence when we find the distinctive effects of intelligence, information, specified information being one such effect.
If I might weigh in here. All right, I will reiterate what Michael said at the beginning here. This debate is supposed to be about origins of life, and everything they've said on the other side is irrelevant, okay? They have not addressed that mountain of literature that I've talked about, thousands of experiments, hundreds of labs. It's all as if it doesn't exist, which is a pretty serious neglect. Let me get to the specific points that were raised in the original presentation they made. The Cambrian explosion. I quoted directly from Meyer's 2003 paper, and he said very clearly no antecedents in only 5 to 7 million years. And it's clear, in fact, there are antecedents. They are the Tomatian small shelly faunas, which are, in fact, members of phyla that precede the trilobites. And now we have the Dochentot faunas 80 million years earlier.
Don, I don't know where you're getting that. We acknowledged in that Cambrian paper the presence of three Precambrian phyla. The point we make is that just because there's 3 phyla present in the Precambrian doesn't explain the other 16 or 32, depending on how you count, that arise in the Cambrian. Well, this is not a debate about facts.
Okay, there's an answer to that, though, and you haven't addressed it. And that is, of course, that one of the issues about the Cambrian fauna is it's the first one that's actually largely skeletonized. And one of the problems we have with the fossil record of soft-bodied organisms, you don't get to see a lot of the details of soft tissues. You get rare examples like the Ediacar fauna or the Xinjiang fauna, the Chinese Cambrian, which allow you to see things that normally aren't fossilized. And during that period of time when they're soft-bodied, we get lots of change we just aren't going to fossilize too well. So there's an event, something going on right there about the earliest Cambrian, skeletonization gradually kicks in. At that point, you're going to start to see things you couldn't see before because the skeleton preserves, and it preserves stuff that was otherwise hard to see in soft-bodied fossils. There's another issue here, which is something that has not been addressed. This is talking on very simplistic terms about neo-Darwinism, as if it's back in the fruit fly generation work of the 40s and 50s. If you guys have paid any attention to what's been done in the last 15 years, everything now is focused on what's called evo-devo, evolutionary development. Okay?
I'm sorry.
Let me finish my point here. Don't keep interrupting. Okay? Evolutionary development has proven that there is a lot more to it than just population genetics, and especially a lot more than just fruit flies in cages. What's happening now is people are looking at embryos and looking at how embryos develop, and they're finding that there's all sorts of stuff that goes on at fairly rapid rates and very large scale with relatively small genetic change. That's particularly relevant to the whale example we just heard about. If you read some books by Hans Tevis and the others who are working now with whale embryos and looking at how these work, it turns out that many of these systems that he claims are impossible to evolve on a stepwise basis are all coordinated with each other and are developed products of embryology. And that if you have an evo-devo mechanism where just a few genetic switches kick in, this can happen quite quickly and all in a coordinated fashion. Not that 7 million years is very quick, even by fruit fly standards, okay? We're talking about a fairly long period of time. Most of what Dr. Sternberg presented as an extrapolation falls in the same problems with extrapolations in general. You try to generalize a rate over a long period of time and assume that it's linear, assume that it's constant. That does not work. For example, you cannot talk about whale population sizes. Right now, whale population sizes are at a minimum because of overhunting and overfishing. They may have been much larger